A millionaire was about to end his life, but a little girl said something that changed everything. The New York sky hung heavy with gray clouds that night. The lights along the Hudson River shimmered across the steel-cold water. On the towering bridge that cut through the sleeping city, Ethan Cole stood alone, his hands gripping the icy railing. He had once been one of the most powerful men in tech, the founder of Blue Pulse, a digital finance company once valued at over $5 billion. But in less than 48 hours, everything had collapsed. His accounts were frozen, his assets seized, and the media branded him the fraud of the century. Ethan still remembered the last call from his mother. Her voice trembled through the phone. "You've disgraced your father, Ethan. Don't call me again." The cold, empty dial tone echoed long after she hung up. Wind howled across the bridge, tugging at his expensive coat. Below him, the Hudson churned dark and restless, whispering promises of an easy end. Ethan stared down, thinking of boardrooms, billion-dollar contracts, photographs with smiling investors over glasses of red wine. All of it felt like a farce now. He shut his eyes. 17 years of building erased by one name, Lucas Grant. Lucas, his friend, co-founder, and chief financial officer, had used Ethan's credentials to create a network of shadow accounts, laundering millions overseas. When the investigators came, every trace led back to Ethan Cole. He thought justice would prevail. It didn't. The media didn't want truth. They wanted a villain to headline. Old friends vanished. Investors cut ties. The man once on Forbes' 40 Under 40 list was now left with nothing but silence and shame. He climbed onto the railing. The wind slapped against his face. If he disappeared, everything would be easier. For his mother, for everyone. No more headlines, no more humiliation. Ethan inhaled deeply and closed his eyes. Just one step. "Mister, are you okay?" The voice froze his heart mid-beat, small, soft, but clear enough to slice through the fog. Ethan opened his eyes and turned. 10 feet away stood a little girl, shivering in a faded pink jacket, clutching a small cardboard box filled with candy bars. Her tangled curls framed wide brown eyes that reflected the streetlight's glow. "What are you doing here?" Ethan's voice rasped. "I'm selling candy," she said quietly. "But it's late? No one's buying anymore?" "Go home," he muttered. "It's dangerous." But she didn't move. She simply stared at him, a mix of fear and curiosity in her gaze. "Were you going to jump?" she asked, innocent yet piercing. Ethan turned away, jaw tight. "It's none of your business." "But if you jump," the girl whispered, "you'll never know that someone out there still thinks you deserve to live." He froze, then turned back, staring at the tiny child standing in the biting wind. She trembled but didn't look away. "What's your name?" "Lila," she said, smiling faintly. "Lila Thompson." A simple name, yet in that moment Ethan felt as if a small light had been lit in the darkness surrounding him. He stood still. The wind roared above the Hudson, but somewhere deep inside his chest, something cracked open, just a little. Ethan stood still for a long time, watching the little girl in the cold wind. Lila clutched her box of candy, her cheeks flushed pink. "Are you cold?" she asked softly, afraid to break the silence. Ethan gave a weary smile. "I'm fine, kid. You should go home. It's late." "But were you really going to jump?" Lila hesitated. Ethan turned away, eyes fixed on the dark river. "Maybe I was." The girl was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "My mom wanted to die once too." Ethan froze. He turned to look at her. Lila met his eyes calmly. "She was sick. The doctors said there was no hope. She cried every night, but she told me that no matter how much it hurts, life is still worth living. For someone else." "For someone else?" Ethan asked, voice cracking. Lila nodded. She said life isn't just for us. Every smile, every kind word, every small good thing we do. It matters. Even when we're gone, the love we give keeps living in the people we've touched. The words, so simple yet profound, sank deep into Ethan's heart, like light piercing the darkest place. He remembered that last board meeting, Lucas placing forged reports before him, the scorn of the directors, the cruel smirks of reporters, his mother's broken voice over the phone. He thought he had run out of reasons to go on. But here, in this freezing night, a child he'd never met had given him the first reason to stop. "How old are you?" he asked. 7, Lila said. "But I feel older." "Where do you live?" "Across the river, with my foster mom. I sell candy to help pay rent." Ethan looked at her tiny hands, fingers purple from the cold, nails smudged with chocolate. His throat tightened. This child, who had lost her mother, was still fighting to live. And he, who once had everything, was ready to throw it away. Lila stepped closer and held out the last chocolate bar from her box. "I was saving this for tonight, but I think you need it more." Before Ethan could speak, she placed it gently in his hand. "It's my mom's favorite. She said whenever you're sad, take a bite and think of something good." Ethan gripped the candy bar, words caught in his throat. "Aren't you afraid of me?" Lila shook her head. "No, I think you're just really sad, but sad people can still be good." He laughed quietly, the first real laugh in weeks. It was tired, but real. They stood together in silence. The wind carried the mist of the river and the distant hum of the city. Ethan looked down at the dark water, then back at the child. "You know, I've lost everything." "No, you haven't," Lila said with a small smile. "You still have your heart." Her words broke something open in him. Tears fell silently. He didn't even know why. Shame, forgiveness, or simply the feeling of being seen. After a long pause, Lila tugged his sleeve. "Come on, mister. It's too cold. You'll get sick." Ethan looked at the bridge one last time, then nodded. He stepped down from the railing, feet touching the ground. Lila smiled and gently took his hand. "You're not going to jump now, right?" "No," Ethan said quietly. "I'm not." "Good, because I think someone out there still needs your light, even if you can't see it yet." They walked together, hand in hand, disappearing into the fog of the night. For the first time in months, Ethan could feel his heart beating, not from fear, but from hope. They walked together until the end of the bridge. When his feet touched solid ground, Ethan felt as if he had stepped out of a dream with the voice of a 7-year-old girl pulling him back from the edge. They stopped at a bus stop near the river. The night was deep. The street lights cast a soft amber glow over Lila's small face. "You'll be okay getting home?" Ethan asked, his voice rough. "Yes," she nodded. "I live nearby. Thank you for not jumping." Ethan gave a faint smile. "Thank you for showing up." Lila opened her candy box and took out a folded piece of paper. "If you ever need help, come here. That's where my foster mom lives." Ethan took the paper, reading the shaky handwriting. "Mrs. Thompson, number 52 River Street." He nodded, tucking it carefully into his coat pocket. "Go home now, Lila. Get some sleep." "You too," she said, waving before disappearing into the fog. Ethan stood alone. The bridge behind him faded into darkness, but the small chocolate bar in his hand caught the lamplight and glimmered faintly. He held it tightly, afraid that if he let go, everything might vanish again. That night, he had nowhere to go. He wandered through rain-slick streets until dawn, finally sitting on a cold park bench near the river. The morning wind cut through his coat, but deep inside, for the first time in months, a small light was still alive. The next morning, Ethan woke on a cold park bench near the pier. The grass was wet with dew, the sky pale gray. He curled up in his wrinkled coat, his head throbbing from the night wind. Beside him, other homeless people slept, some in torn sleeping bags, others under thin blankets. He had never imagined himself among them. In his hand, he still held the chocolate bar Lila had given him. He hadn't opened it. The wrapper was damp with mist, but the words, "Sweet Hope," were still visible. He gripped it tighter. Maybe that little girl was the reason he was still here, still breathing, still thinking about tomorrow. A rough voice spoke beside him. "First night sleeping outside, huh?" Ethan turned. An older man sat on the next bench, gray hair, stubbled beard, kind but weary eyes. He handed Ethan a paper cup. "Here, coffee. It's warm." Ethan hesitated, then took it. The warmth made his fingers tremble. "Thank you." "No problem," the man smiled. "Name's Raymond Lewis. Been here 6 years now." 6 years? Living like this?" Raymond nodded. "Life's got a lot of ways to break you, kid. Some lose money, some lose homes. Me? Lost both. But as long as you're alive, there's a chance." Ethan said nothing. The old man's calmness carried no bitterness, only peace, something Ethan had long forgotten. "What's your name?" Raymond asked. "Ethan." "Ethan Cole?" Raymond tilted his head, recognizing it. Ethan nodded faintly. "Used to be." Raymond chuckled softly. "Your name was all over the papers for weeks. Don't worry, I don't believe everything they print. Reporters love drama more than truth." Ethan gave a tired smile. "Truth doesn't matter anymore." "Oh, it does," Raymond said, sipping his coffee. "But before anyone else can see it, you have to see it yourself." The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. They sat in silence, watching the sun rise above the trees. The first light spilled through the branches, falling on Ethan's hand, still holding that small bar of chocolate. Raymond stood. "There's a soup kitchen down the block. Better coffee than this. Breakfast starts at 7. Coming?" Ethan hesitated. Once he'd owned penthouses and sports cars. Now he'd have to stand in line for a free meal. But then he remembered Lila's words. "Every good thing matters." He nodded. "Let's go." The soup kitchen was in the basement of an old church. The smell of oatmeal and coffee filled the air. Volunteers moved through the room with trays, offering food and smiles. A plump older woman with silver hair approached Ethan, handing him a tray. "First time here, sweetheart?" she asked warmly. "Yes," Ethan murmured. "That's okay. We all need a little help sometimes. I'm Martha Green." She smiled, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Eat up, son. Things will get better." Ethan sat down and looked around. The men, women, and children eating quietly. No judgment, no pity. Here, everyone was simply human. He took a spoonful of warm oatmeal. It slid down his throat, and for the first time in weeks, he didn't just feel full. He felt alive. And in that quiet moment, Ethan realized, there are still people who see the person inside me, like Lila, like Raymond, like Martha. Maybe what he needed wasn't money, but a reason to live. For the first time since his world collapsed, he didn't feel invisible anymore. He made a silent promise. Somehow, he would find that little girl again. Lila, the child who had given him a second chance. The sky was gray and heavy as Ethan walked along the eastern Riverside Road. Below him, the murky Hudson reflected the flicker of neon lights from crumbling buildings. He clutched a crumpled piece of paper in his hand, the words scrawled in uneven handwriting, Mrs. Thompson, 52 River Street. That address had haunted him for 3 days. Every time he looked at the chocolate bar in his coat pocket, he could still hear Lila's small voice echoing in his mind. If you ever need help, come here. He stopped in front of an old brick building, its walls cracked, windows patched with duct tape. On the corner, a small diner glowed weakly under a faded sign that read, "Mary's Diner." The smell of frying oil drifted through the air as the sound of knives and pans clattered from inside. Ethan pushed the door open. A middle-aged woman in a waitress uniform was wiping down the counter. Her hair was tied neatly in a bun. Her face looked tired, but her eyes were kind. "Excuse me," Ethan said softly. "Are you Mrs. Thompson?" She looked up, surprised. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" "My name's Ethan Cole. I met Lila a few nights ago. She said I could find you here." At the mention of Lila, Mary's face tightened with worry. My God, where did she go that night? "On the Hudson Bridge," Ethan replied quietly. "It was late. She said she was selling candy." Mary sighed deeply, resting her hand on the doorframe. "I told her not to go out after dark, but she's stubborn. She says she needs to help me pay the rent." Ethan didn't respond. He knew what desperation felt like when there was nothing left to lose. Mary set the towel down. "Thank you for bringing her home safe. She's been talking about you ever since. The sad man on the bridge, she calls you. She said she made you smile." A faint, weary smile crossed Ethan's face. "She saved me." Mary nodded gently. "That sounds like her. Lila has this way of making people believe in good again, even when life's been cruel to them." Footsteps echoed from the back of the diner. "Uncle Ethan!" Lila ran up, clutching her old candy box, eyes bright with excitement. "I knew you'd come." Ethan knelt and smiled for the first time in weeks. "I promised, didn't I?" She grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the small apartment behind the diner. The place was simple but warm. A wooden table, a few chairs, thin curtains fluttering in the breeze. On the wall hung several photos printed from an old phone. A young woman with kind eyes holding a little Lila in her arms. Ethan pointed at the photo. "Is that your mom?" Lila nodded. "Her name was Eleanor. She died last summer." Mary added quietly, "Emily was my cousin. She passed away from cancer, left Lila in my care. I worked 2 shifts here just to keep up with rent and the medical bills." Ethan glanced around the small, dimly lit room. "How long have you worked here?" "Almost 4 years," Mary said, then hesitated. "But recently, someone's been helping." "Helping?" Ethan looked up. "Yes," she smiled faintly. "A friend of Eleanor's. His name's Luke, or Uncle Luke, as Lila calls him. He stops by sometimes, brings gifts, even pays the rent when we're behind. If it weren't for him, I don't know how we'd manage." Ethan froze. "Luke?" "Yeah, he said he used to work with Emily at some financial company. What was it called?" "Blue Pulse?" Ethan interrupted, his voice tightening. Mary blinked. "Yes, that's the one. You know it?" Ethan didn't answer. His hands began to tremble, his heartbeat quickening. Lucas Grant, the man who betrayed him, the man who stole his company and left him branded a criminal. And now, that same man was helping the little girl who had saved Ethan's life. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. He looked at Lila, still smiling, showing off her candy box. She said cheerfully, "Uncle Luke's taking me to Disneyland this summer." Ethan's chest tightened. The same man, 2 lives, 2 fates, one destroyed, one protected. Mary didn't notice his expression darken. She continued, "He's very polite, always says he's helping us to honor Emily's memory. I think it's sweet, really." Ethan forced a smile, but questions were already screaming in his mind. Why would Lucas help Lila? Coincidence? Or something darker? Emily had worked at Blue Pulse. Could she have discovered something about Lucas's secret transactions? He stared again at the photo on the wall. The woman's eyes seemed to hold a message, something she'd wanted to say before she was gone. "Mrs. Mary," Ethan said softly, steadying his tone, Do you happen to have anything Emily left behind? Papers? Notebooks? Maybe a computer?" Mary frowned, thinking. "Actually, yes. There's an old laptop in the cabinet. I never opened it. Didn't know the password." "Could I take a look?" "Of course, but why?" Ethan hesitated for a moment. "Because it might hold something that explains a lot." Mary nodded and disappeared into the next room. Lila tilted her head curiously. "What's going on, Uncle Ethan?" Ethan smiled faintly, brushing her hair. "Nothing, sweetheart. I just need to check something." When Mary returned, she carried a dusty silver laptop. Ethan took it carefully, his eyes sharp, focused again like a man stepping back into battle. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I'll be careful." Lila watched him, puzzled. Ethan bent down and whispered, "Promise me something, Lila. Don't tell anyone, especially Uncle Luke, that I came here." Her eyes widened. "Why not? It's just a little secret between us, okay?" Lila nodded seriously. "I promise." He smiled and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're a brave girl." Then Ethan stepped out into the rain-soaked street, the old laptop tucked under his arm. The drizzle fell cold on his face, but inside him something new stirred. Not despair this time, but suspicion. Another piece of the puzzle had just fallen into place. The little girl who had saved him from death might also be the link to the man who had destroyed his life. The rain hadn't stopped by the next morning. Ethan sat in the corner of a small cafe, Eleanor's old laptop resting in front of him. The screen was lifeless, the battery long dead. He tried turning it on several times, but only a faint clicking sound responded. He took a slow breath, steadying himself. The feeling was both familiar and foreign, as if he was about to uncover something immense and dangerous. The cafe door chimed. Lila slipped in, her raincoat soaked, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "I told Aunt Mary I was going to the bakery," she whispered, "but I came to see you." Ethan smiled faintly, pulling out a chair for her. "I need to talk to you, Lila." "About Uncle Luke?" He nodded. "Do you trust him?" "I used to," she said softly. "But lately, he looks at me funny, like he's scared I know something." Ethan tightened his grip around his coffee cup. He didn't want to frighten her, but the truth was unfolding, piece by piece. "Lila," he said gently, "you mentioned your mom left a box, right?" "Yes," she nodded. "It says, 'Mom's Things.' I've never opened it since she died." An hour later, they sat together in the small room behind Mary's diner. Weak daylight filtered through the old window as Lila placed a worn cardboard box on the table, her small hands trembling slightly. "I think Mom wanted me to keep it until I was old enough to understand," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "We'll open it together, okay?" She nodded again. Ethan carefully lifted the lid. Inside were a few faded photographs, a silver necklace, a broken laptop, and a small leather notebook, its edges frayed with time. Lila ran her fingers over the first page. Elegant handwriting appeared. "Diary of Eleanor Grant." Ethan froze. "Grant?" Lila looked up. "That was my mom's last name, before she married Dad." His stomach tightened. Grant, the same last name as Lucas Grant. He turned the page. The entries were dense, written in neat cursive. The last line trembled across the page, the ink blurred with tears. He closed the journal slowly, feeling a cold hand grip his heart. Everything was connecting. Lucas Grant, Eleanor Grant, the illegal transfers, and the child unknowingly holding the key to it all. "Lila," Ethan whispered, "do you remember where your mom used to feed the birds?" "Of course," Lila's eyes lit up. "At the dock by the carousel. Mom said it was our secret place." Ethan rose from his chair, determination flooding his chest. "Can you show me that place?" "Yes, but why?" "Because," Ethan said quietly, "I think your mother left something there. Something that could save a lot of people. Maybe even me." Lila squeezed his hand, smiling softly beneath the gray afternoon light. "Let's go find Mom. Uncle Ethan." He nodded, not to find the woman who was gone, but the truth she had left behind. Outside, the rain had stopped. The first pale glow of sunset broke through the clouds, reflecting off the Hudson like a promise, waiting to be fulfilled. A new chapter was beginning, and somewhere out there, Eleanor Grant's secret was ready to be found. The afternoon sky was heavy and gray. Ethan and Lila followed the narrow path leading down to the old dock, where the Hudson met a smaller river. In the distance, the wooden carousel creaked as the wind pushed its chipped, painted horses in slow circles. "Are you sure this is the place?" Ethan asked quietly. Lila nodded, holding his hand tightly. "I remember Mom sitting on that bench. She said it was our secret spot." The old wooden bench stood near a rusted railing. Under the seat, faintly carved by a blade, were two initials, E+L. Ethan knelt, tracing the letters with his fingers. His chest tightened. It felt like touching a ghost's memory. "This is it," he whispered. He began checking around the bench, running his hands along the edges, then crouching lower to inspect the worn wood underneath. Something felt off. A small gap just wide enough for a fingertip. "Lila, look at this." He pried the wood loose carefully. Inside, wrapped in a plastic bag, was a silver USB drive. They both froze. The wind carried the smell of the river, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Ethan opened the bag, his hands trembling. He knew this was what Eleanor Grant had written about in her diary. "This is the proof," he murmured. "Your mother hid it here all this time." Lila looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. She left it for you?" "No, Lila," Ethan said softly, tears in his eyes. "She left it for you. I'm just the one who needs it to make things right." They returned to a small cafe near the dock where Ethan borrowed an old laptop. When he plugged in the USB, the screen flickered to life, showing several folders: bank records, .zip, emails, video, .mp4. He clicked on the video. The image was grainy, but the woman's face was clear. Eleanor Grant, her skin pale, an IV line beside her arm, her voice weak but steady. "My name is Eleanor Grant. I'm recording this in case something happens to me, so the truth will survive." Lucas Grant used the company's name to move millions of dollars into hidden offshore accounts. I helped him, unknowingly, thinking it was legitimate business. When I found out, I copied everything. He threatened me, and I know I don't have much time. If anyone finds this video, please protect my daughter, Lila. She knows nothing. And please tell Ethan Cole he is innocent. It was Lucas who orchestrated everything. Her voice broke as tears rolled down her face. I just hope that one day justice will come, and my daughter can live in peace. The screen went black. Silence filled the room. Ethan sat still, tears falling onto the keyboard. Every word from Eleanor cut deep, but they also carried hope. Everything he needed to clear his name was in this tiny USB drive. He looked at Lila. The little girl sat quietly, eyes glistening, her small hand gripping his. "Uncle Ethan, this means you can prove you're innocent now, right?" He nodded, but fear twisted in his gut. If he went public, Lucas Grant would know. And the first person Lucas would come for was Lila? Ethan stared at the USB, so small, yet heavy with 2 lives' worth of truth. "Lila," he said softly, "we found the truth, but sometimes truth can be dangerous." She looked up, not fully understanding, but held his hand tighter. "So, what do we do?" Ethan swallowed hard. "We'll find the right way to tell it and keep you safe. I promise." Outside, the clouds finally broke apart, sunlight glinting across the Hudson's surface. And in that fragile light, amid the storm of truth, a single spark of hope began to shine. The hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of redemption. That night, Ethan sat alone in a dim, rented room, the bluish glow from his laptop reflecting off his weary face. The USB lay on the table, small, fragile, yet holding both his and Lila's fate. He knew one thing: silence was no longer an option. He opened his contacts, his finger stopping on a name he hadn't called in 2 years. Nora Blake, investigative journalist, former lover. The only person he had ever fully trusted. The call lasted less than a minute. When Nora heard his voice, she was silent for a few seconds, then whispered, "Meet me at the old place." 3 hours later, inside a quiet downtown cafe, Ethan placed the USB on the table. Nora studied him, her eyes a mix of suspicion and something softer. "You know, if we publish this, they'll come after us," she said. "I know," Ethan replied. "But truth rots in the dark, and this one had already started to stink." The next morning, the headline dominated the Ledger's front page. "New evidence suggests Ethan Cole was framed in Blue Pulse fraud case." The article included clips from Eleanor Grant's video, the dying woman pleading for her daughter's safety and for Ethan's name to be cleared. The internet exploded. News channels, financial blogs, and online forums lit up. Blue Pulse accused of massive money laundering. Ethan Cole might be innocent. Lucas Grant missing. 2 days later, the Federal Financial Investigation Bureau officially reopened the Blue Pulse case. But somewhere in the dark, Lucas Grant was watching every headline. His skin pale, his eyes filled with panic. He knew. Once the files on that USB became public, everything he'd built would collapse. Driven by fear, Lucas made his move. He showed up at Mary Thompson's house, smiling calmly. "There are dangerous people looking for Lila," he said smoothly. "I'm her uncle. I'll take her somewhere safe." Mary believed him. When Ethan returned later that evening, the door was ajar, and the room was empty. On the table lay a single note, written in a shaky child's hand. "Uncle Ethan, don't worry. I'm with Uncle Luke. He said he'll protect me." Ethan gripped the paper, his hands trembling. He knew. The nightmare had just begun again. The signal from Lila's old phone blinked on the laptop screen. The words flashed clearly. "Lakeview Estate, North Suburbs." Ethan sped through the pouring rain, wind slamming against the car windows. His face was tense, his eyes fixed with determination. With every second that passed, he could only hear one sound, his own heartbeat, heavy and fast. Lucas's mansion sat by the lake, lights glowing faintly through the wet trees. Ethan killed the engine and crept toward the back door. It was slightly ajar. Cold air seeped out, carrying the sharp smell of metal and disinfectant. A faint sob drifted down from upstairs. "Lila," he whispered. He climbed the staircase silently. The door to the storage room creaked open. And there she was, sitting in the corner, her hands tied, eyes wide with fear. "Uncle Ethan!" she cried. He rushed over, untying the knots. Just as he loosened the last rope, a cold voice echoed behind him. "I knew you'd come." Lucas stood in the doorway, gun in hand, lips curled in a cruel smile. "You never learn when to quit, do you, Ethan?" Ethan stepped in front of Lila. "Let her go. She has nothing to do with this." Lucas laughed bitterly. "Nothing to do with it? She's family. I'm protecting her from you." A gunshot cracked. Ethan ducked, the bullet grazing his shoulder. Blood splattered across the wall. Warmth slid down his forearm, metal tang filling his mouth. He lunged forward, tackling Lucas to the ground. The two men struggled violently as rain poured through the shattered window. Just as Lucas raised the gun again, flashing blue lights flooded the courtyard. Sirens screamed outside. The front door burst open, officers storming in, and behind them, Nora Blake, shouting, "Drop the weapon, Lucas Grant!" Lucas froze, gun slipping from his grasp. Ethan collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. Lila ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his blood-streaked face, sobbing. "Uncle Ethan?" she cried. He managed a weak smile, his trembling hand resting on her shoulder. "You saved me first," he whispered. "Now I'm just returning the favor." The sound of sirens faded into the night. As dawn broke through the storm clouds, one chapter closed and a new life quietly began. Months later, the courtroom was packed. On the front row, Ethan sat silently, eyes fixed on the screen showing Eleanor Grant's video, the evidence that shattered the entire Blue Pulse case. When the verdict was read, everyone rose. Lucas Grant, sentenced to 30 years in federal prison for financial fraud, evidence tampering, and kidnapping. Ethan Cole, all charges dismissed. Applause rippled through the courtroom. Nora turned to Ethan and whispered, "You did it?" Ethan smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting a peace he hadn't felt in years. After the trial, he was granted back a portion of his assets, but he barely touched it. Money and fame meant nothing anymore. They were ghosts of a life he no longer wanted. Instead, he poured it all into building the Second Step Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping people who had lost everything find a new beginning. On the small sign outside the office, the words were engraved, "Because everyone deserves a second chance." One quiet spring afternoon, Ethan and Lila sat at a little ice cream stand near the park. The air smelled of waffles and laughter. Lila held her cup of vanilla ice cream, her eyes distant. "Uncle Ethan," she asked softly, "do you think Mom's proud of me?" Ethan looked at her, tangled hair, bright eyes glowing in the sunlight. He smiled and nodded. "Of course, my brave girl. Your mother would be so proud of you." Lila grinned and scooped a big spoonful of ice cream toward him. "Then you have to eat some too, because today's our new beginning." Ethan laughed. He leaned forward, taking a bite, the cold sweetness melting on his tongue like the taste of freedom, forgiveness, and family born from loss. Outside, the sun set slowly over a peaceful sky, and for the first time in years, Ethan Cole felt truly home. 6 months later. The autumn wind drifted gently over the Hudson Bridge. Below, the golden sunset shimmered across the water, carrying echoes of everything that had happened. Ethan stood by the railing, holding a small candy box, the first gift Lila had ever given him. Beside him, Lila looked up, her hair fluttering in the wind. "This is where I found you," she said softly, her voice carried by the breeze. Ethan smiled faintly. "No, Lila. This is where you saved me." She paused for a moment, then shook her head, her eyes glowing with warmth. "I think maybe we saved each other." They stood together in silence, listening to the wind hum through the bridge's steel beams. The Hudson River flowed below, steady, endless, washing away the pain, leaving only peace behind. A car pulled up at the far end of the bridge. Mary stepped out, holding a basket of food. She smiled at them. "Dinner's getting cold," she said, half chiding, half laughing. Ethan turned toward her, the woman who had lost everything, and the child who had brought him back to life. He knew now they were his family. "Mary," he said softly, emotion tightening his throat. "You and Lila, move in with me. The house feels too big, and I was never good at being alone. We can take care of each other. How about that?" Mary froze for a second, tears glimmering in the fading light. Lila squealed with joy and threw her arms around him. "I was hoping you'd say that." They walked off the bridge together, hand in hand, beneath the golden sky. Ethan looked back one last time at the Hudson River, the place that had once marked his end, now shining as the beginning of everything. In the distance, the lights of the Hudson Bridge flickered to life, dancing across the water. The bridge, once an ending, now stood as a symbol of beginnings. And as the night wind whispered through the rails, Ethan knew their journey had come full circle. But the love, hope, and light born there would live on forever.